Hello boys and girls, my name is Penny and welcome back to another episode of being told by someone in your Discord server that you are always online. That was soul destroying, I'm not gonna lie, that messed with me. for a few days, every time I booted up the app I was like, what am I doing with my life? These people think this is all I do. Anyway, today's going to be a different kind of video. In line with the teacher video that I made before where I was just talking about something that personally means a lot to me, this is going to be in the same vein. I'm going to be talking about my favourite book, so enjoy Penny talking about random stuff he cares about. Without further ado, let's talk about weightlifting, Imperial Japan, and secretly being gay. And there's a man that knows a lot about these. Me. No. It's a fella called Yukio Mishima. Now, wait. If you know who Yukio Mishima is, you may be thinking, oh god, don't worry, I'm not going to be charging a military base with my private army anytime soon. I just like Confessions of a Mask, I think it's a good book, and Sun and Steel, which is the book that we're going to talk about today. Now that I've got the disclaimer out the way for the people that do know Mishima, if you don't know Mishima, here's an abbreviated summary from an essay that I wrote about him and this book 2 years ago. Sun and Steel is the mantra and code of author Yukio Mishima, based in the samurai tradition of Chrysanthemum and the Sword, which was scattered through his lineage. Mishima gives his philosophy on working out and its importance not only on physicality but also mental clarity. Mishima was a Japanese author mainly renowned for his poetic writing style and symbolistic depth. Born as a direct descendant of Tokugawa shogunate, I'm sorry if I butchered that, which ruled Japan from 1603 until the Meiji Restoration of 1863. Mishima was of important cultural heritage, which is something that from the start defined how he lived. With that short summary, Sun and Steel is an insight into Mishima's mind, and is very dense in both lessons and opinions. A lot of Mishima's legacy is tarnished by his political antics. I guess you could say he was truly a Kanye of his time, if you catch my drift. HP Lovecraft-esque tomfoolery. Yeah, he wasn't a great guy. But now that I've made my disclaimer, let's get into why I love this book by such a troubled man. Mishima as a child was meekish and shy. He was raised by his grandmother who, depending on your perspective, you could either describe as caring or overbearing. And because he spent a lot of his time inside, he fell in love with literature, which dominated his life until his 30s, which once he hit his 30s, this seemingly flipped. And this is where you can see the first part of this book that interests me, which is Mishima's level of disgust with words as a concept. Now that sounds quite interesting, an author who hates words. And if you think that, then you're getting it. This is why I like this book so much. Mishima describes words as if they are a filter which tarnishes the beauty of life. And he follows that up by showing his disgust for quote-unquote intellectuals who don't value physical traits. This comes from Mishima's clear inspiration of Greek philosophers, who often talked about how mind and body are one and need to be cared for equally, which in Mishima's opinion is a message that has been lost. A lot of Greek philosophers talked about the importance of a man's chest and how that represents all of these symbolistic things, which I'm not too sure if I entirely agree with, but it's an interesting concept, one that definitely hit Mishima quite hard as he based the rest of his life around it. If you want to learn more about this particular part, I would suggest a great video on YouTube called Mishima Bodybuilding and Greek Sculpture. It's by Russell Walter. It's around 3 years old, I'm sure you'll be able to find it. But if you're someone who cares about Greek philosophy and you want to dive more into this, I'd definitely suggest it. I love this book, don't get me wrong, but I do realise what Mishima did here is the 20th century version of like the incel guy from school becoming like a red pill take guy. You know, no one talked to him and then all of a sudden he's on trend. He's on trend and his multi-level marketing scheme is going great. With that being said, I personally think that there is value in the physical parts of the world, especially now when everything is digital. And I don't mean that in the esoteric way that Mishima does, but just an appreciation for the small things in life. I don't mean that in the physical way he does, because when he says this, he's referring a lot to like gym and weightlifting. I mean things like birds chirping, a paperback book, an open flame or rushing water. There's a level of beauty in the real world that can be imitated but never replicated. Mishima had an unhealthy obsession with this beauty, and we'll talk about that later, but it goes hand in hand with Sun and Steel. And I think this angle he took later was him sort of filtering that love of beauty through his own self-disgust at his childhood and how meekish he was, which if you read his works is very self-evident. You're talking about someone that fundamentally never accepted themselves all the way down to the end. And by fundamentally I mean there's a lot of examples of Mishima refusing to be open about parts of his life that very much were a thing. Admiring the natural world in both its beauty and brutality is something I personally find myself doing. I just realised what I described is essentially the meme that's like guys will see this and say hell yeah. Philosophically that's all Mishima did, is he was like guys will see a waterfall and be like hell yeah. But Mishima was obviously troubled, and he used this as a justifier and a coping mechanism for quite a few things. To explain this, I guess it's best I repeat this quote from Mishima. Perfect purity is possible if you turn your life into a line of poetry written with a splash of blood. I think that shows a lot of what Mishima thought regarding what I've just spoken about. The constant simultaneous battle and harmony of beauty and brutality, how they're sort of linked together. You have beauty, brutality, chrysanthemum, flowers, sword, brutality, sun and steel. It's quite a direct line. The second thing I love about this book is it talks a lot about voluntary suffering. I recognise I've dunked on the 6 AM discipline cold shower bros a lot on this channel, and I fully stand by that. But one thing I do value a lot that they seem to is weightlifting. I've spoken a lot before on this channel about me at school being the sort of funny fat kid, and like a lot of those types of people, the moment I got out of school I got into the gym. The dedication to something like that has taught me a lot about myself. I don't hide that I'm a massive fan of psychology either. Carl Jung and Viktor Frankl have made massive impacts on my life, and I'm sure I'll talk about them at another point as well. But I've learned an equal amount about myself and my limits going to the gym and running than I have through psychology. I don't want you to start weightlifting or running. I'm not advocating for anything here. Everyone has their own struggles and their own things that they should work through. Like everything Mishima did, he lifted for very esoteric reasons. Things like realizing the full extent of your humanity and testing your strength not only physically but your resolve in the face of suffering, which are quite out there reasons compared to what a lot of lifters live for now, which is that they want to look good and they want to feel good. He was more in the Greek Homer sense of fulfilling humanity. And this is one thing I appreciate about Mishima a lot, is he's very esoteric, which to some people is an awful trait that they absolutely hate, but it's something that I enjoy. I mean, I'm a fan of Nietzsche, and Nietzsche's very similar to this. They both use the same flowery language. Mishima was a well-known studier of Nietzsche, and his style very much blended in with a lot of European styles at the time. To finish the voluntary suffering part, there's a beautiful quote that I've been obsessed with since reading the book at 16, and that is, "It was thus I found myself confronted with those lumps of steel, heavy, forbidding, cold, as though the essence of night had in them been still further condensed." If I'm honest, I wish I knew why this stuck with me so much. Of course you have Mishima's flowery language, but this quote does have a weird grip on me. I think it's because the image that it crafts around it, the cold heaviness, implies a sense of dread, but the determination of grabbing something so seemingly cruel and indifferent. I realise this is an extreme way of looking at completing a set of bench presses, but what can I say? Finally, in some of the more problematic parts of this book, is legacy. For Mishima, the cultivation of a great body wasn't just about appearance or even health. It was a tool he required in order to add that poetry to the splash of blood that he viewed his life as. Ultimately in this book, Mishima shows his deep romanticism and also constant flirting with the more abstract parts of life. As I said before, that's something that he took from his deep appreciation of Nietzsche and Russian literature, which can be seen in his works. What Mishima cared for, he romanticized to the furthest extents and held it in sort of this deity level position. And I think there is a warning to be made whenever anyone lives a philosophy 100%, because I don't think life is that concrete. A lot of philosophers that have been wholly embodied in their philosophy do not end up well. Nietzsche is a great example of that. He became so embodied of what he believed that he eventually lost his mind because he was so detached from reality. Regarding how this book applies to my legacy, I'm not sure. I don't think it does. But for me, this is a key piece in understanding one of the most brilliant, yet simple, beautiful, yet brutal minds in human history. In the end, Mishima did end up completely embodying his philosophy. I've mentioned Nietzsche, but that's also kind of what drove Freud mad. He was so tied to his ideas. To wrap this up, what was his philosophy? Sun and steel, a romantic struggle between the symbiosis of beauty and brutality. Nature embodies both, and in that way it's ultimately poetic in a way that words can't describe. The relationship between us and this struggle, how we as complex beings balance this nature inside of us, the cold indifference of things like suffering, which persist regardless, and yet the great beauty and flourishing of humanity under care itself, is something that fascinates me. Mishima's view seemed to be that he was a flower growing in the sun which will one day be cut down. And by understanding the steel, the beauty of the sun that he grows in envelops him. I understand this was a very different type of video. I have a regular Penny upload coming soon, talking about why does everyone have a podcast, which is a phrase that I hear a lot now. So podcast coming soon. No, I thought about doing a podcast, but as much as I talk on this channel, I don't think I could talk for that long. Also, I stutter a lot. I have to very heavily edit the audio clips for this. But expect a regular upload soon. Thank you for listening to me talk about this. This is something that has deep meaning for me. So, have a great day, pull over if you're tired, call me when you get home. My name has been Penny, and thank you.